Okay, shall I start?
Just a minute. A very warm good morning to all the participants for our last session in the advanced GST certification course. Today we are going to cover the topic on comments, observation, disclosure, and qualification in GST audit. For deliberating on the topic, we have eminent speaker CA Bhavesh Mittal. About Bhavesh Mittal. Bhavesh Mittal is a qualified chartered accountant in the year 2017, and he is presently working at Hirenge and Associates, NCR branch. He is a team leader and provided advisory support to multiple clients in manufacturing, service, and retail sector on GST implications upon them, and also have conducted their indirect tax reviews and audits. He has been elected as an empaneled faculty of ICAI under GST and involved in delivering GST seminars at various platforms of ICAI. He is also a visiting faculty at Vishwas Nagar branch of ICAI, New Delhi, relating to GST. He was also elected as a chairman of Central India's Chartered Accountant Student Association, which is SICASA, during his articleship, and he's also lifted Best SICASA Award in Central India region. With this brief introduction, I would warmly welcome today's speaker Bhavesh Mittal to deliberate on the topic. Welcome, Bhavesh.
Thank you, Arjun Bhai.
Just a minute. And to add upon value to the deliberation of the speaker, we have for the expert comments today we have CA Mahadev R, who is one of the partners of Hirenge Associates, who would be adding value addition and comments upon the deliberation by the speaker. About the expert, he is a chartered accountant qualified in the year 2011 and presently heading audit division of the firm. He has developed a strong understanding of practical application of indirect tax laws to the business, suggesting workable models and standard operating procedures for compliance under indirect tax, including GST. He is an active contributor of articles for Excise Law Times, KSCAA, and in various online forums. He is active speaker in various forums and has assisted the authors of Central Excise Made Simple and Practical Guide to Service Tax. He is also author on GST audit issued by Bloomsbury. He is also an active member of powerful study circles like Akshara Study Circle and etc. With this brief introduction, I would warmly welcome today's expert, CA Mahadev sir. Mahadev sir, welcome to this session.
Thank you, Arjun. Thank you. All the best, Bhavesh.
Yeah.
Thank you,
so with this brief introduction of both speaker and expert, I would like to hand over the session to our today's speaker, Bhavesh Mittal, who would be taking over the session. Bhavesh, it's to you.
At the outset, I would like to thank Hirenge Academy for this wonderful opportunity to me, and obviously Arjun Bhai for this brief introduction. Now, let's start with the today's topic, which is the last session of the day, that is comment, observation, disclosure, and qualification in audits. As we know, this is the last thing which we see in audit, and today is the last session. So it's just what I should say. Sorry. See, the topic for the day is comments, observation, disclosures, and qualification in audits. So before entering into the session, let us focus on contents for today. At the outset, we will understand key terminologies like what do you mean by qualification, disclosures. Then we will move on to requirement of audit under the GST law. Then we will move on to the certificate provided in the law. Then some issue-based discussion on the reporting methodology to be understood by the auditors. And then discussion on heads for observation and qualification. And we will request then to our expert Mahadev sir for his expert comments at the end of the slides. Okay. So the key terminologies for today's discussion would be first, true and fair versus true and correct. As we know, there is a minute difference which has a big implementation strategy difference is true and fair versus true and correct. In this true and correct, absolute level of assurance is given. Absolute level of assurance is given. That means though not 100%, but the records are substantially correct. The level of insurance is not 100%, then also it indicates it's substantially correct. Means if in audit report it has been written true and correct, it means we are giving the absolute level of assurance, not reasonable assurance, which we normally give as per the ICAI standards. So true and fair, as we normally see in our statutory audits and all other things, true and fair, it means when absolute assurance cannot be given, means absolute assurance cannot be given where sampling has been used, where we have performed test checks on controls, then we normally give true and fair opinion. Normally, true and correct can be seen in 3CD reports of income tax, and true and fair can be seen in this normal statutory audit report. GST law is a mixture of both the things. We'll see later on. So, qualification and observation. Again, there is some difference between these two words. Qualification means some reservations or adverse comments. Means when an auditor is qualifying a report, he has some reservations over the report, over the correctness of the report, reporting of some figures, maybe material, immaterial, adverse comments. Maybe the report may not be good or not be reflecting true and fair view. Uh, Important point is to note that in qualification, the amount is also reported to what extent the financial statements are adverse. Whereas observation means just a view, just a thought process or a remark, which may be positive, which may be negative. Further, an auditor can give his assumptions, presumptions uh, for his safeguard as an observation in the audit report. Now, for certifying an audit report, the most important thing is standards of auditing issued by the ICAI. So SS 705 deals in this regard, deals with qualified opinion. Just the auditor having obtained sufficient and appropriate audit evidence concludes that misstatement individually or in aggregate are material but not pervasive to the financial statements. What it is written, when an auditor he obtains sufficient audit evidence that either in individual capacity or in aggregate capacity, the misstatements are material. Material means are very, very important, but not pervasive. Why not pervasive? Because it will ruin the financial statement. Auditor will not be expressing any opinion. So material, but not pervasive to the financial statement, then a qualified opinion is given. Further, there is one more aspect where qualified opinion is given is the auditor is unable to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, and the possible effects means there is some stock count is going on around 50 kilometers, but due to COVID, the auditor is debarred from going there, and the stock count has to be closed today. So he is unable to obtain the audit evidence because he is unable to go to the stock count. But he can forecast the possible effects that are material but not pervasive. Then a qualified opinion can be given. So the last terminology which is relevant for today's discussion is report versus certificate. As we already know, certificate means it's a certificate issued for certifying the accuracy of facts. Means if I am doing something and then someone is certifying that Bhavesh did that, then it's an accuracy of fact. It does not involve any estimate or opinion. Whereas in a report is a formal statement which is based on opinions, estimates, and multiple inquiries, examination, any other thing. So there is big difference between this report and certificate. Now, when we have understood the key terminologies for today's discussion, let us just briefly go through the requirement of audit under the GST law. Section 35(5) read with Rule 83 requires the auditor, just give your consideration, requires the auditor to certify the reconciliation statement. As we have read, the difference between the certificate and report. Certify means accuracy of facts. The reconciliation statement drawn under Form 9C. Now, there was a press release issued by CBIC on 3rd July. What they told? They told the role of a GST auditor while performing the 99C function is limited to the reconciliation of figures Okay, the press release categorically stated this. The role of auditor is limited to reconciling the figures. And whereas in above section 44, it has been written the auditor need to certify the reconciliation statement. So the scope is limited by the press release. However, we don't know. The government today promises more, and then later it delivers less than. There is quite an awareness with relation to this. So with this background, let's proceed for our certification formats of GSTR 9C. Broadly, there are two formats. Format number one, when the statutory audit, whereas GST audit is done by the same person. Second format, there are two different person. Means for statutory audit, there is a separate person, and for this GST audit, there is a separate person. Normally, our work is concerned to second, and maybe multiple chartered accountants work concerned to first one. So, uh, in the for this is the certification format which I have just copied pasted from GSTR 9C format. Kindly note this format is just for the first case where the records are audited by the same person, and I have only attached this format because it is more or less same except some differences which I'll highlight. So it reads as certification in case where the reconciliation statement is drawn by the person who has conducted the audit, as I have explained. I have examined the balance sheet as on the PL and income statement for the period, cash flow statement. Based on our audit, I report the said registered person has maintained books of accounts, has not maintained the following accounts. The accounts which are not maintained needs to be stated in 1, 2, and 3. Now, the third thing, I report the following. Please give your consideration on this third thing. I report the following observation, comment, discrepancy, inconsistency, if any. And then auditor will report the comments and discrepancy. I'll go in detail about the third thing. Now, third B. This part is common in GST audit as well as this. Means when the audit is done by the same person or by the two person. And the above part was for uh, where the audit is done by both only the statutory auditor. So in this case, I have obtained all the information and explanation which, to the best of my knowledge and belief, were necessary for the audit information explanation, were necessary for the purpose of audit, were not provided, oblique partially provided to us. In my opinion, proper accounts have not been kept. I certify the balance sheet PL, blah blah, in agreement with the books of accounts maintained and the at the PPOB, principal place of business and additional place of business. As we know, GST law prescribes to keep the accounts in all other business, all places of business. The document required to be furnished under 35(5) and reconciliation statement required to be furnished under 44(2) is annexed with Form 9C. Now, the important point in for which our discussion is based, in my opinion, and to the best of my information, and according to the explanation given to us, the particulars given in Form 9C are true and fair, not true and correct. Whereas format of GSTR 9C, when it gets over, while reconciliation of the values is concerned, there is an authorization below the 9C format where the auditor says the figures given while reconciling the values is true and correct. And here, while reporting, it says true and fair. That needs to be considered. Means for the reconciliation of values, means while reconciliation of that turnover, taxable turnover, input tax credit, the auditor needs to give his opinion as true and correct. Means he should uh, certify the fact that this is the difference actually. And here the auditor needs to report his opinion, form an opinion which is true and fair, not true and correct. So now I am examining in depth these PPTs. This third A thing which I highlighted, which I said it is only pertaining to those cases where the auditor, statutory auditor and GST auditor are the same person. This is not at all applicable when the audit is done by the GST auditor. So let us understand in detail what is the role of this third A thing, third A and third B thing. Kindly note, any observation, comments, discrepancy or inconsistency out of balance sheet, profit and loss account, and other various accounts and records, documents maintained. It has to be reported in 3A and 3B. It is a reporting of fact, means if I can show you this third A thing and third B thing. It is a reporting of fact. Why I'm saying reporting of fact will follow. There are 4 types of reporting. Any observation, comment, discrepancies, and inconsistency noted in the course of examination of the financial statement and accounts, records, and document maintained. Means while I'm examining the financial statements, I observed certain things that I need to report. Necessary information and explanation, whether obtained or not, whether obtained or whether or not the same was provided. I sought certain information from the management, but the management did not provide me. That needs to be reported. Whether or not proper books of accounts has been kept. For example, warehouse keeper needs to maintain the record of inward and outward in-out inventory. He has not maintained that records. That I need to write here. Whether or not the balance sheet PL are in agreement with books of accounts. In a nutshell, there are these 4 types of reporting in this reporting of fact cases, 3A and 3B. Whereas these 2 tabs are only in case of case 1 auditors. Case 1 auditors. And kindly note, it is restricted to observation and comments. An auditor need not qualify this 9C based on this balance sheet and PL thing. Means when a statutory auditor has already given certain comments coming out of his statutory audit, which are not relevant to GST, rather they are related to correctness or completeness of the financial statement in itself, and that point has already been reported in the statutory audit, the only observation or reporting of the fact is to be given rather than a separate qualification per se. So kindly note, it is restricted to only observation and comments by the auditor in respect of the examination of financial and accounts and maintained. Okay, so this thing pertains to reporting of fact which is coming out of balance sheet PL, which has already been reported in the statutory audit or somewhere coming out from the statutory audit. Now, for issues under GST law, that there is separate tab in both the cases, same auditor or different auditor. The tab could be seen in point 5 at the below side of this PPT. So now coming on to this point 5, para 5, it's not a reporting of facts, rather it's forming an opinion or reporting the observation and qualification, subject to which 9C is true and fair. When I read para 5, there are broadly 2 aspects. Whether, as per the information and explanation given to him means auditor, the particulars furnished in Form 9C are true and fair. Means whatever the information is received by the auditor, whether the particulars given in 9C are true and fair as per that information or not. Now, what auditor needs to do? He needs to check the overall tax compliances. Means whether a sales register has been where a sales register has been received, whether all supplies are charged to tax or not, whether the sales register is sufficient, complete and is matching with the income stream provided in the trial balance. All these things auditors need to check. Also the issues with respect to tax levied, tax collected but not given, all these things. Means overall tax compliance auditor needs to check, and the tax position he needs to assure whether the self-assessed liability paid by the SSC, as per section 59 of the Act that you have read is correct or not, fairly true or not, that auditor needs to assure. Another thing, if auditor has any observation while examining the information explanation given to him in the above question, if auditor has any observation and qualification, then he needs to report these observation qualification in detail. Now, what is the flow which is actually going? First, auditor will receive the information explanation, then he will check the overall tax compliances, then he will come out with a tax position which he will compare with the self-assessed liability paid by the person. And during the course of this, if he has any observation which may be adverse or positive, or he has any qualification which is normally adverse to the SSC, then he needs to report this observation qualification, and the methodology of reporting we will be discussing in the upcoming slide. So I have tried to capture a couple of cases whereby the reporting methodology has been explained. So kindly consider. In first case, an additional tax liability is identified on account of reconciliation. Means while reconciling the values as per books of accounts and as per GSTR 9, which is a summary of 1 and 3B. So while reconciliation between these books of accounts and GSTR 9, I found certain liability which was not reported in 1 and 3B, and then therefore it is an additional liability. What auditor needs to do? In 9C, auditor needs to report that liability as additional liability in Part A, Part A, Part A, table number 5, and also he needs to report the same as an observation that certain additional liability were found, and due to those additional liability, I have reported that figures there, and the same has been paid by the client. Second thing, additional tax liability identified on account of other than reconciliation cases. What can be an additional liability on account of other than reconciliation cases? Just assume there was a product, there were certain doubts with respect to exemption, and Dilip Kumar judgment says when an exemption is claimed, the burden is on SSE. So as per that, when I went for audit, I saw there is some product where some confusion is there with related to exemption, and normally industry and government is taking a view that exemption must not be claimed, and such exemption is 50% of the turnover. So it is a material non-compliance, and substantial tax liability will arise due to that. So auditor needs to mention, it can't be, the accounts can't be true and fair. The 99C can't be true and fair, and he has to qualify the report. Now all the subsequent cases will pertain to these non-reconciliation cases. So I have listed out a couple of examples. Suppose if immaterial non-compliance is captured by the auditor, but such immaterial non-compliance may lead to substantial tax liability. Again, because of the substantial tax liability, auditor has to mention the accounts can't be true and fair, and he has to qualify the report. Just for example, what can be an example of immaterial non-compliance having substantial tax liability? Example, merchant exports. I am a merchant exporter. My 100% business is of merchant export. I receive good at 0.1%, and then I sell goods to merchant exporters at 0.1%. I took the benefit of the government notification 40/2017. But the notification lists out various conditions which needs to be complied for taking this 0.1% benefit, like letter to jurisdictional office, export within 91st day, and all those things. So the merchant exporter to whom I sold the goods, means I am the supplier, and the merchant exporter to whom I sold the goods at 0.1%, he did not supply the goods or exported the goods in 91 days. So it's an immaterial compliance, non-compliance to me, because I have complied my all the condition. Only my recipient did not comply his condition. Then also it has substantial tax liability. I have to raise a debit note of the differential amount, that is 18% minus 0.1%. So it may lead to substantial tax liability, and accordingly it needs to be reported, and it is sufficient for qualifying the audit report. Fourth case, uh, again additional tax liability on account of non-reconciliation cases. If material non-compliance, okay, in this case non-compliance is material but not pervasive to financial statement. What if pervasive? If the effective non-compliance is pervasive, then auditor will not at all express any opinion, because the financial statements are not worth expressing any opinion, or it will give disclaimer. So the if material non-compliances plus no substantial tax liability, see, the non-compliance is material, but tax liability is small. What auditor needs to do? True and fair, but the report non-compliances must be reported. See, I'll give a practical case. Certain bills of advocate was received by the client, over which no tax was paid under reverse charge. So normally, if he would have paid the tax on reverse charge, he is a 100% taxable business. So he would have paid the credit. So amount is less, means revenue neutral position. But the non-compliance is material because he has not discharged RCM or 9(3) liability. And if he receives some same bills in big quantum in next year, he will not at all try to discharge this liability if I not report. So what auditor needs to do? He may say the account are true and fair, but subject to these non-compliances or these qualifications. Another case, non other than reconciliation case, again immaterial non-compliance, non-pervasive effect, no substantial tax liability, true and fair, but the non-compliances which are although immaterial needs to be reported. Now, important case. Auditor took various presumptions, safeguards, assumption, evidence based on which the audit is certified. Normally, during the course of audit, auditor take various assumptions, just like 180-day condition. Till date, there are only few software which can verify this 180 days condition. Otherwise, there is some compromise on the part of the auditor, where we get the quarterly reports like of vendor, quarterly closing report of the vendors, on the basis of which we try to assume that these are the payment has been made within 180 days from the date of invoice. This is a big assumption, but auditor needs to report all such assumption which he took while certifying the audit report. Okay, so this could be the assumption case. Any accounts, records, or documents are not properly maintained. Just earlier, I took warehouse owner example. He has to maintain the inventory in and out records very accurately. He has been cast on that responsibility by the law. So, based on materiality, it is material on warehouse owner business. Auditor needs to form an opinion whether the non-compliance is such that the detail furnished cannot be said to be true and fair. Who will check the records of warehouse owner whether they are correct or not? If we don't have any record of in and out inventory. So based on materiality, auditor needs to form an opinion. However, if the non-compliance does not affect truth and fairness, it's a very small non-compliance, uh, then auditor needs to report as an observation. Okay. So now coming on to this, all those issues are over. Now some interpretational issues may come while signing the audit. So these interpretational issues differ from person to person. There may be a case wherein auditor's view, a particular case may fall under the taxable category, whereas in my view it may be exempt. Similarly, so I have tried to list out certain one case. Uh, See, point number 8. If multiple interpretations are involved, and in the opinion of the auditor, the same is taxable, the auditor must report the details of such non-compliance as observation qualification in para 5b. Means there were multiple interpretation, and in auditor's opinion it is taxable. Best example is Columbia Asia cross charge, wherein certain employee of one branch goes to another branch for audit or doing something related to that branch, and the first branch who sends the person did not cross charge the second branch for the person sent on the basis that the employees are common to company and not to a particular branch or particular GSTIN. So therefore, there will be no requirement of cross charge. But in view of the auditor, the same is taxable. He cites Columbia Asia ruling. Although advanced ruling is related to person who has taken the ruling, but important point is it is not taxable as per the management, but taxable as per the auditor. What auditor will do? He must report the details of such non-compliances observation qualification in para 5 of part B. Part B means that certificate. Note, however, auditor can anyways he is open to obtain a second opinion from an independent expert in the subject matter, because while signing the audit report, an opinion of the expert is of substantial value. Similar case, in view of the management, it is taxable, but in view of the auditor, it is not taxable. What auditor needs to do? Example, canteen recovery. Management took a conscious call. Notice pay recovery. Management took a conscious call based on the advanced rulings. Adverse ruling, I should say. That we will pay tax on canteen recovery. We will pay tax on notice pay recovery. But in auditor's view, it is not taxable. what auditor can do? He can just give a general remark that interpretational issues. I have not recommended that additional liability, although there was not so. So, if auditor says these things are taxable, these things are non-taxable, then backing of law, case law, or other evidence needs to be given. Like for canteen recovery, certain good cases are Bhima Hotels Private Limited. It was a good case, although small. Notice pay recovery, there will be multiple cases, HCL learnings, and all those cases. So these backing of the case law must be given before taking a stand that these things are not taxable, and auditor needs to quote all these case laws in the report itself. For interest and penalties, if certain non-payment, short payment of interest penalty are identified, auditor may report as observation qualification as per the materialness of those penalties. If there is a general procedural penalty like registration certificate was not found hanging at permanent place of business, so based on professional judgment of the auditor, he may choose to report or not report the same. Further, other procedural non-compliance like 17.5 figure, which is not affecting any figure or my credit ledger or output ledger while filing the 3V. Means when I file 3V, there is reporting of output tax, there is reporting of input tax, and the net is paid. There is, after reporting input tax credit, there is one table which asks about the 17.5 credits. It does not impact my credit ledger. So across the industry, there are various types of SOP being followed that people normally do not take the credit which is ineligible in itself, or certain people try to take and then reverse in other category and show in 17.5. So this is auditor may take a call that it is non-reporting of 17.5. Taking net credit in 3B is a procedural lapse, and that does not lead to non-compliance. So he may choose to report non-report based on his professional judgment. But if any procedural non-compliance is a substantial condition in law, kindly note procedural non-compliance, but a substantial condition in law, like goods not received. What means is a GRN not made, I cannot find out whether the goods received or not received. So what I normally do, I reconcile the input register and the GRN date, and whichever is later date, I go to avail the credit so that I satisfy this procedural condition of goods not received. It is a procedural non-compliance if I do not follow, but it is also a substantial condition in law under section 16, whereas 36(4), it is also procedural non-compliance if I did not reconcile the two-way and all those things, but it is a substantial condition in law. In all those cases, auditor has to qualify the report if non-compliance is found, or at least he has to observe if there is no tax liability based on its materialness. So all these reporting methodology I have tried to explain. Further, what is important is while preparing the report or while drafting the report of GSTR 9 and 9C, what are the heads? What are the important heads for observation or qualification? I should say. What are the heads for observation and qualification? In other words, I should say, which are the major headings under which my qualification and observation must be based on? So, first thing, some general comments needs to be given, like I have conducted the audit based on sampling. I have complied to general accounting procedures, all those things. Books of accounts and financial statement has been audited by another auditor. I am reconciling 9C based on case 1 and case 2. So certain reliance has been placed to audited financial statement figures appearing there too. Now, the management has tried to segregate the trial balance GST and wise, which is not a requirement of any other law. So, therefore, for conducting GST audit, management tried to give GST and level information, which I have relied upon in the management. The software, accounting software, it is effective. It is effective, and I assume it is effective. So, this point must be given. Further, certain accounting software also given segregate and give GST and level information. So there must be this point that accounting software is given correct GST and level segregation, because if I don't write this point, there may be implication like Schedule 1 related parties applies. So all these cases, limitation of accounting software like 180 days reversal, accounting software did not provide me invoice-wise detail with respect to that 180 days non-payment cases. So all those things must be given. Now some specific cases related to outward supplies. Normally what happens, Normally, when I finalize the annual return GSTR 9, I report certain figures in Part 5 of GSTR 9, as you may be aware of. Part 5 is formed as per the press release dated 3rd July and 4th June, whatever. Part 5 is formed based on 3B, means whatever figures pertaining to 1819 I have shown in GSTR 3B of 1920, that auditor will go, management will go and report in Part 5 of GSTR 9. In that case, it is referred as subsequent year transaction. So since 3B is a consolidated thing, I cannot go to the thought process of management and identify that whether they have included or not those figures in GSTR 3B. So a general remark must come based on the working of 3B provided by the client, and based on reconciling the value, I found certain items pertaining to 1819 have been reported in part 3B of 1920, and thereby I suggest to report this in part 5 of annual return. So this point must come. Further, if there is a difference between 1 and 3B, so auditor may place reliance based on which return is filed correctly. Normally people rely on 3B because it is a tax paying document. So if there is a differences, auditor needs to mention this point specifically. Further, uh, there may be cases of deemed supply. Deemed supply means branch transfers may be considered as deemed supply, which under Schedule 1, which without consideration also becomes supply under Section 7. So, auditor cannot go to the thought process or minds of the management. He can only verify those transactions which are recorded in the books of accounts. So, in cases there is a ledger showing related party transfers or intercompany transfer, then only he can deep down go and verify these deemed supply cases. Otherwise, he cannot. So, those transactions which are not recorded, intercompany transaction, interbranch transaction, auditor should give a specific comment that he has verified only the recorded transactions. Unbilled revenue, there are two, three philosophies or methodology over which unbilled revenue is recorded. Normally, people what they do create a opening balance at the starting of the year, which is a carry forward of the closing balance. Then, in month on month basis, they try what they do. They reverse that opening balance and then create a full closing balance based on that month's unbilled revenue, which is revenue recognized but not billed. So by this opening and closing balances, by these opening and closing balances, what I need to do, I need to rely on the books of accounts. So specific point must be given for this unbilled revenue cases also. Advances, which is normally applicable on service cases, not on goods cases. So what I do, sorry. So advances also auditor needs to give the point that opening and closing balances have been relied upon. Time of supply. Normally, time of supply is invoice or payment, whichever is earlier. So, auditor cannot go deep down because payment comes normally for consolidated for many invoices. There is a consolidated payment. Payment is somewhere means cannot be linked with invoice wise. So, in multiple cases, so time of supply auditor can give, can't verify all these things. They have relied upon the management based on their recording of invoices. Classification. While doing the audit of GSTR 9C and while considering the fees which we get for 9C and the timeliness of completion, classification is not an aspect which we can look upon. Also, it is a separate assignment because classification involves in-depth study. So for classification, you can place reliance on the management. A specific note observation could be given. Rate of tax. Rate of tax indeed comes from classification. So there is a same point which is applicable. Valuation. In valuation, in case of post supply discount, where your case pertains to supplier, where supplier provided post sale discount with respect to his credit note, undoubtedly it is linked to invoice and thereby he reduced his output liability. But there is a condition whether the recipient reduced ITC or not. And again, 3B is a consolidated figure. So recipient, while checking recipient GSTR 3B, first of all, it may not be available. Secondly, if available also, you cannot certify or you cannot think that he has reversed your credit, your pertaining to your credit note or not. So in that case, post supply discount case, you can say it cannot be verified. It is just an example. There may be n number of cases. place of supply. Some events are conducted which are outside the state. The place of supply for that event may pertain to that state, and the credit is availed in this state. How can you come to know unless there is a specific narration mentioning that? Unless and the invoice pertains to this state also, which is also wrong. So there may be many cases you need to give comment upon. Text type levied. So in normally we found in industry multiple times what the client does, he charges IGST instead of CGST SGST liability by mistake. Maybe on maybe due to reason he cannot identify the place of supply correctly at that time. So in that cases, auditor, we suggest that auditor need not recommend any interest liability because there is no revenue loss. Also, section 77 says so. So in this type of cases, auditor need to specifically report that we have not recommended interest liability. Further, export deemed export case. There is a, in case suppose exports are done but LUT not filed at the time of export. So circular, there is a circular which says in case of delay or what it says it in case LUT is filed late also and exports are done prior to LUT. So it is not a substantial non-compliance and thereby benefit could not be lost. So this type of circular wherever relied must be given upon your report that client has relied this circular and due to this circular we are not debarring the client from benefit of exports. Any exemption claim must be given. After output, there must be a reconciliation of input tax credit, wherein books of accounts must be reconciled to whatever input ledgers and 3B which is given, and all those reconciliation thing. Auditor needs to express his observation in that regard. Figures were reconciled or not reconciled. Further, 9C says expense-wise breakup in table 14. So that auditor may need to give that we have verified those expense-wise reconciliation on sample to sample basis. Further, 2A, 3B differences, which normally reconciliation is performed by the client. Auditor needs to give that we have relied the 2A reconciliation performed by the client and the differences coming out of 2A and 3B reconciliation are not individually verified by us. Further, input tax credit wherever it has been taken, except those cases which are apparently visible, must be eligible, and auditor has client has taken enough consideration while complying the while crediting his uh, credit ledger with the credits which are for the condition provided under section 16. Further, there is in format of GSTR 9, there is a breakup of input service and capital goods. That breakup to the extent visible, that is okay. For that invisible differences which are just quoted by the auditor based on vendor wise analysis, that this vendor supplies services, this vendor supply goods. In that type of cases, auditor need to specifically observe that these are based on estimates. Further, blocked credits to the extent narration says me this is gift, this is food. What I can do, I can report additional liability, but otherwise I cannot report. So I have to mention that point. Reversal of input tax credit wherever done must be reported. Other procedural points with respect to accounts, records, and documentation, that whether the auditor has maintained whether the client has maintained accounts records or not. Further, whether the accounts records were found in all the branches or not. If there is a limitation that auditor cannot go and check all the branches, he has to report it. Due to certain limitation, I was unable to go and check all those branches. Further, warehouse keeper did not maintain inventory records, all those things. There may be other important areas as well, like reverse charge mechanism, job work. Reverse charge mechanism, normally it comes on my expense side, so all those expenses must be verified by the auditor, but then also there remains a possibility that certain liabilities may be reported, legal professional charges, but advocate name not visible in books of accounts. Client also did not told, so all this possibility needs to be taken care of. Job work 1 and 3 year compliances, that material have been received back within 1 year and 3 year. If not, additional liability has been paid by the management. E-way bill generated for every invoice, every moment, unless otherwise exempt. Registration has been taken for all the places of business uh, in different state and within state also. If there is a separate registration, it pertains to specific place of business as per the amended act. TDS, TCS cases. Other interpretational matter like anti-profiteering, interest for delayed payment means like I have filed 3B delayed. So whether interest paid on net basis or gross basis, we normally suggest for net basis. So that thing point needs to be mentioned, means output minus input. That net we have paid the interest. That point needs to be specifically mentioned. Further, in cases of investigation scrutiny, the status needs to be reported. Adjudication appeals, the status needs to be reported by the auditor. All these things, refund area, refund obtained, refund pending, all these things needs to be reported. So with this, I can conclude with my session. Any query you can post me, and I'd like to invite Madhav sir for his expert comment in this PPT which I shared. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Bhavesh, for your deliberation. Now I would invite Mahadev sir to provide value addition and comments from his side.
Yeah, thank you, Arjun. Bhavesh, well presented. You have covered all the important points which are required to understand how we should report on observation. So here, first I'd like to start with the scope of the audit. I think there is a huge confusion on scope of the audit itself. Even there was a press release last year to clarify on this scope of audit also. There can be three possibilities for this GST audit. So one is it can be treated as purely a reconciliation exercise. The second possibility could be reconciliation exercise plus the audit as per the GST law, wherein the auditor will not go beyond the books of accounts. The third possibility can be reconciliation, then going through the books of accounts in order to ascertain the compliance. And next is going beyond the books of accounts also. Example can be in order to investigate the bogus transactions, for example. What should be the scope of GST audit out of these three scenarios? If you purely go by the press release, it appears that it is only reconciliation exercise, because press release clearly says that the scope is limited to reconciliation of your books of accounts figures with annual return. But that cannot be the case, because we cannot rely on press release itself. It is not even by way of circular. If we refer to section 35(5), it clearly says every registered person should get the books of accounts audited. It doesn't say the books of accounts needs to be reconciled. So what is audit? So audit also has been defined in GST law to state that it is examination of records, and records can be under GST law or any other law, as Bhavesh was mentioning, in order to ascertain the correctness of turnover, taxes paid, input tax credit, refund, and to assess overall compliance. So we cannot say just by reconciling the books of accounts, we cannot say we have done the audit. So therefore, there is a need to actually do the audit. So my view is we should reconcile these figures plus we should verify the books of accounts, but we need not go beyond the books of accounts. Say it is not in my scope as an auditor where I am certifying under 9C to investigate for a bogus transaction, whether all the outward supplies have been recorded in the books of accounts. So all these things I need not see that. So I can restrict my verification or my audit only to the extent of whatever is recorded in the books of accounts. And next is we have to be very careful. So just below the form, even Bhavesh highlighted that point. Just below the form, it says that the information in 9C form, we have to say that it is true and correct. Whereas in the certificate portion, it says the particulars are true and fair. So is there any difference between information and particulars? Apparently, it appears that there is no much difference. So we don't know, maybe they are not able to rectify this, but the intention appears that it need not be 100% verification which is involved in the 9C. So it can be on a sampling basis or test check basis, but as an auditor, yes, I need to be very careful because somewhere it also uses the word true and correct in 9C form. So I need to ensure that I take larger samples, I take all important samples or important transactions in order to do my audit. So there we need to be very careful. And whatever liability an auditor is going to recommend, so this is going to be only optional for the auditee. So it is not mandatory for the auditee to clear all these liabilities and accept whatever the auditor is saying. But instead of, in spite of this, the auditor should be very careful in reporting the points, because these reports we are filing with the department, and the department will easily get to know what are all the issues or what are all the observations which are made by the auditor, and this can be the basis for issuance of show cause notice and demanding the taxes by the department. So we should be very careful. We should report only those points or qualify only those points we are absolutely sure that there is a issue. Even if we have any interpretation issues, say there can be a canteen recovery, so there is a one expert who may say that on canteen recoveries GST needs to be paid. There can be another expert who is saying that on canteen recovery GST need not be paid. So when there are interpretation issues between experts itself, then always we can take a chance that there is a possibility that it need not be liable, and we need not report those aspects also. And as he has mentioned in the PPT also, there can always be a expert opinion or second opinion which can be sought in order to decide whether a particular point needs to be reported or not reported. We should ensure that unnecessarily the client or the auditee does not suffer because of our reporting. So that is the point which I wanted to highlight. And next is penalties. So there is also a column wherein we need to report on the, we need to quantify the penalties also. So penalties need not be quantified always, because it is not clear sometimes. For example, say in case of a reverse charge mechanism, so there is a documentation requirement. One is I need to raise a self invoice whenever I procure supplies from an unregistered person, and in all the cases I should raise a payment voucher. So what happens if I don't comply with this requirements? Is there any specific penalty? There is no specific penalty for these documentation errors, but there is a general penalty clause which says that for any non-compliance for which there is no specific penalty, the penalty amount can go up to 50,000 rupees. Now say I have 100 transactions wherein I was supposed to raise payment voucher and self invoices. I have not done it. So as an auditor, what is that amount which you are going to mention? Are you going to mention 50,000 for self invoice, 50,000 for payment voucher, or 50,000 into 100 payment voucher, which becomes your 5 lakhs or 50 lakhs? We are not clear on that. So let us leave this aspect to department. We need not quantify. Maybe we can put one point saying that the penalty has not been quantified. And this offers. So before we start the audit, so I think even last week also I made this point very clear. Again, I'm reiterating. So we should be very clear with respect to the terms which are used in the offer and the engagement letter. So when you are accepting the offer, we should make it very clear to the auditor in what way we are doing the audit. So are we restricting this only to the reconciliation part, or are we doing a thorough audit wherein there can be additional liabilities for the audit also? Sometimes what happens is, if I don't put these points very clearly, so at the last moment when I'm reporting all these issues, there can be troubles, because auditee may not accept all the points which you're saying, even though legally it is correct. So to avoid all these issues, make sure that in your offer itself you clearly say, I'm going to do the audit in this way, and if there are any non-compliances which are material in nature, I'm going to report this unless you are going to comply with this point. So you have to make it very clear, and you can also tell him what can be the possible or the common errors which are going to be there in an audit, so that even the auditee is prepared whenever you are taking up the audit. And there were also many reporting points which Bhavesh had highlighted in his PPT. So make sure that all these points are there in your MRL also. For example, there was one example of payment to the vendors within 180 days. So it is nearly impossible for me as an auditor to check whether all the 1,000 transactions have been paid within a period of 180 days. So I will not be able to ascertain whether the credits has been taken only after receipt of goods in all 1,000 transactions. And for me, it is also not possible for me to check whether all the goods have been received within 1 year after the goods have been sent for job work. So these are all the cases wherein 100% verification is not at all possible. What I can do at the best is ensure that I take management representation letter wherein the management is going to give me a confirmation stating that we have complied with all these transactions. So we need to be very careful. And sometimes when we have done the sample verification, we may find a case. See, the management gives an undertaking saying that we have made payment to all the vendors within 180 days, but you come across three or four cases wherein the payments are not made within 180 days. So then that point needs a correction in management representation letter. We need not accept whatever is there in management representation letter as it is. Also make sure that this management representation letter is as close as possible to your certification date. Say you obtain this management representation letter before 1 month of certification, and we also should consider the extension of this due dates. So many times we'll be thinking that next week is the due date, but we get a notification with an extension for another 1 month or 3 months. So make sure that you get this management representation letter as close as possible to your certification date to make sure that all the important points are covered in your MRL. And discuss all the issues before reporting. Many times it may also happen that the auditee agrees to your observation and he also makes the payment. There is no bar on reporting these aspects also. So as an auditor, you can also mention these were the issues which are reported. Say, for example, there were 4 cases wherein the payments were not made within 180 days. So there was an interest liability at the rate of 18%. So you highlighted this issue to auditee, and auditee also paid, say, 1 lakh as the interest amount for this. So in the audit report, you can mention there was a liability to the extent of 1 lakh towards the interest because there was a delayed payment to the vendors, and this amount has been paid, and these details also have been incorporated in your annual returns. You can give these details. So this is going to add more confidence to the department on the correctness or the extent to which the audit has been done. So we need not ensure that always there is a clean report. Clean report can also by way of reporting all the compliances which are done by the auditee after we make after we report the issues. And comments. So comments or observation always need not be negative. There can be certain positive comments also for the client. For example, say the client is engaged in export of services. So by mistake, what he's doing is he's treating the place of supply as India instead of treating the place of supply as the abroad destination, and he's paying the taxes. So if you are an auditor, you need not qualify this, but you can always make an observation stating that the auditee has been considering the place of supply as India and paying GST, whereas actually the place of supply is outside India. And you can also recommend for refund also. You can say the auditee is eligible for refund and he can explore the option of refund. So this will also substantiate the refund claim which the auditee is going to make based on our recommendation. These are some points which I wanted to add to Bhavish's point. Arjun, over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir, for your valuable suggestions and value additions. Now we can move on to Q&A session, where I could read the questions raised by the participants. Bhavesh would be deliberating on the answers, and in case of requirement of any additions or suggestions, Mahadev sir can provide your views, sir.
Sure.
Okay, sir. Moving on to the first query. Here, while filing annual return, certifying GSTR 9C, we are identifying several circumstances where the assessee has paid the tax liability, however, has not discharged the interest, or he might have short discharged the interest liability. As an auditor, whether I need to insist my assessee or client to pay interest at the time of filing an INC, or since he has already discharged his tax liability, can I ignore the same? What is the extent of my responsibility while certification? Bhavesh.
Okay, it's a good question. The most important point to note here is the interest liability. Whenever the tax is paid, the interest meter stops. And due to this, sometimes management and auditor take a call to not to discharge the interest liability. Whereas as far as interest liability, reporting of interest liability is concerned, if the interest liability is material, undoubtedly auditor must insist the client to pay it off unless there is a specific call which has been taken based on credit lying on the credit ledger or any other reason, CGST paid in lieu of IGST, any other case, there may be possibility. If there is a specific call, then auditor needs to report the same as an observation or comment. But if there is undoubted interest liability, then the client must be insisted to pay. And if it is material, then comment qualification needs to be given. Sir, Madhav sir inputs.
Yeah, 100% I agree with the view of Bhavesh.
Moving on to next query. My assessee has discharged reverse charge mechanism under section 9.3 where the suppliers are unregistered. So as per invoicing provisions, when I am receiving supplies from unregistered person, I have to raise a self invoice, which is a base document for availing the credit under section 16. My client has discharged all the RCM liability and duly availed the credit. However, I have observed that he has not issued any self invoices where the suppliers are unregistered. So presently he is telling that there is a requirement shortage of manpower during this pandemic season. So at the time of filing 2018-19 annual return, do I need to insist upon the mandatory requirement of self invoice, or can I treat it as a procedural lapse and certify without any observations or comments?
See, as far as self-invoicing is concerned, there are many case laws in the pre-GST regime not directly related, but they somewhere say that substantial benefit cannot be denied merely because of procedural lapses. So, considering this, self-invoice is a procedural condition because in itself it is a blank invoice which is not issued by the supplier per se, rather it is to be issued by the recipient. So, as far as benefit of input denial of benefit of input tax credit is concerned, in my view, the credit will not be denied. But as far as reporting is concerned, undoubtedly, and comment needs to be given, and the client must be insisted to comply with the requirement of self-invoicing. Anyways, there are many tools available, Excel tools, wherein self-invoices could be generated in bulk. So these type of tools could be catered to find a solution to this type of issue. Madhav sir comments.
Yeah, so I agree with Bhavesh's view. So we should always insist the client to generate the self-invoice. See, one more point which we need to consider is the self-invoice would be the basis on which you may have to take the credit. So even if we agree that the credit can be taken, but the department is always trying to deny the credit based on silly reasons. So we should not allow the auditee to suffer because of this. So we should convey this importance to auditing, saying that if you can spend some time now to raise the self invoices, instead of trying to argue with the department, you are going to save a lot of time and there will be avoidance of disputes in future. This importance we need to communicate to the auditee. And we can also say that he can generate a consolidated self invoice. So this is not there in law, but we can always say that there is a consolidated self invoice which has been done. But only thing is we should have done it on a transactional basis. So this will become a procedural lapse. But to the extent possible, you make sure that self invoice is raised, and we don't go to an extent of reporting that the self invoice is not there at all, because this will put the auditor in trouble.
Okay, sir. So primarily we should insist upon the assessee to raise the self, and in better to have it in MR to get a representation from the assessee that the document would be made available prior to certifying the audit report. Can that be added to the MRL, or to keep it as a
Ideally, that should not be the case, because as I said, the MRL should be as close as possible to the certification date. So when you are certifying, you should always see whether the self invoices and payment vouchers have been raised also. Because when you are saying you are going to verify at the time of certification, you may miss that point.
Okay. Okay, sir. Moving on to next. Bhavesh, in GSTR form GSTR 9C format, so underneath the every table there are a table for providing reasons for unreconciled difference, if any. So there can be reasons of arithmetical errors provided in the returns also. So if there are differences, unreconciled differences, apart from providing the reasons, in the table underneath the table in Form 9C, is it mandatory for the auditor to provide comment on the same in Part B also, or it can be provided only in that unreconciled differences table?
See, there is no standard operating procedure issued by the government in this regard. However, an
Mhm.
auditor needs to form his opinion. If there is a small reconciliation difference, no separate comments for 2-3,000 needs to be given, and only in reason column one can indicate and close the thing. But there is undoubtedly there is some material thing which has to be given in the form of an opinion, or some judgment needs to be quoted, or some additional comment reporting of accuracy of fact needs to be done. Any that type of thing needs to be reported in part B also. So
Okay.
merely that reason may not be sufficient. Reason should
Mhm.
be one liner or two liner. Because of this reason we have not done this. The impact should be reported in part B. Madhav sir
Okay.
could guide further.
Yeah. So as Bhavesh mentioned, we can use those columns only for mentioning the reasons. Comments can come only if there is any revenue impact because of that. Say there is an annual return figure of 100 rupees, whereas financial figure is 110. So difference is 10 rupees. So on 10 rupees, the reason is it is not considered for discharging the liability. That 10 rupees should be considered for commenting also. It need not be restricted for reconciliation. Say there is another example, say because of this 5O, the miscellaneous entries. So there is some arithmetical error because of which I am getting a difference. So that can come only in the reasons table. It need not be mentioned again in comments table.
Okay. Moving on to next query. Uh, there's an example provided here. So the example provided here is the assessee has not complied with Rule 42 or Rule 43 reversals monthly. However, he has complied the same at the end of the financial year in the annual computation. He has also discharged the interest while reversing the credit. As an auditor, do I need to provide any observation or comment stating that he has not complied monthly, however, he has made it annually and reversed at the end of financial year? Is it required, such observation?
See, normally it is beneficial to give such observation because monthly reconciliation is indeed required by the rule, by the law, with the help of rules. Rule 42 specifically says monthly reconciliation needs to be done, and at the end of the year, there is a requirement for re-reconcile all those things. So there must be a comment. Need not. It may be a positive comment also that audit client has done its year-end reversal, and then finally he has reversed the credit along with interest. So there would be a positive comment in my view. Sir would add.
So here there can be two options. One is if the audit is okay, we can mention this point in the audit report itself. Otherwise, we can issue a separate report for the management for the recommendations, so
Okay.
that in future this payment of interest can be avoided.
Okay, sir. Moving on to the next query, Bhavesh, it is not exactly related to 9C. It is little bit related to input tax credit. The query is, we are an SEZ unit where we are receiving a rent-a-cab services, and the rent-a-cab service is covered within our authorized operation list. So we are receiving two invoices separately where the seats are more than 13 seater and the seats are lesser than 13 seater. So wherever the capacity is more than 13 seats, we are availing the credit. However, our GST auditor, while filing 9C, he is recommending us to reverse the input tax credit. What is the legal stand for this? Are we eligible to claim such credit on rent-a-cab?
See,
Bhavesh.
in this case, in this case, the important point to note is 17.5 prescribes a negative list of those services, those credit which are blocked under the GST law, which is not permissible. That negative list needs to be construed strictly. So the negative list only blocks credit with respect to those motor vehicle or those rent a cab where the capacity. Just Arjun bhai, can you pardon the question with respect to this is credit? This credit is a rent a cab or motor vehicle? Purchase of motor vehicle.
It's a rent-a-cab. The query is about rent-a-cab.
Hmm. Rent a cab. Madhev sir, can you assist? I have to see.
Can you repeat the question, Arjun? The question is whether
Sir,
SEZ
yeah,
unit can take a question.
the query is, I am an SEZ unit. I am receiving rent-a-cab services from my provider. Is bifurcating the seat of the cab capacity is lesser to 13-seater and more than 13-seater. So being an SEZ
Okay.
unit, giving the credit wherever the invoice has been raised by the supplier where the capacity of the vehicle is more than 13-seater. So I am availing the for my GST auditor while certifying the 9C, he is asking me to reverse just because it is a rent-a-cab. So as
Okay. Okay.
provision, is
Got
it
it. Got it.
actually restricted or I can avail?
See, we also should understand what is the meaning of the cab for this purpose. If you refer to this Motor Vehicles Act, so there can be motor cab or maxi cab. So in both these cases, the seating capacity will be less than 13 seaters. So when it is more than 13 seaters, it will not become cab. So that is the reason for which there was also a change in the definition of, there is a change in the wordings in section 17.5, wherein they have allowed the credit for vehicles with more than 13 seater capacity. So in this case, where I have the bifurcation for more than 13 seaters, I can take the credit and I can substantiate it by depending on the definition of the cab in Motor Vehicles Act.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, moving on to next. Sir, we have agreement with our vendor where vendor is providing me a credit option of 1 year to make payment. However, proviso to section 16 provides that I have to make payment within 180 days. So what should be the comment provided in the 9C where the assessee has not made the payment within 180 days, stating that he would make only
Percent to
before
agreement. Percent.
the first year. Yeah.
See, there are two, three interpretational issues in this regard. When I talk about 180-day reversal, the law says where the SSC fails to make the payment. So there is one view that failure means if the agreement in itself allowed me 1 year, how can payment within that time limit could be considered as failure merely because GST law has specified a 180 days time limit. Further, there is also a view that the GST law cannot override the contractual term arising out of the business. So these are two, three case laws. But considering the department stands since pre-GST regime, department is taking this 180 days condition very seriously. So in my view, it must be reported merely as an observation, and also it must be suggested to client to reverse the credit because anyway, whenever the payment is made, client is eligible to avail that credit. It is only a cash flow position that needs to be considered. Sir, your view.
Yeah. So if it is a question for future transactions, then it is better to make the payment within 180 days and take the credit. And if it is for the past transaction and the issue is on whether I should report or not, then again, because there is a interpretation involved, so you can take a call as an auditor whether you believe with the concept of wherein there is a failure only if I delay it after 1 year, because my contractual terms are very clear, wherein I need to make payment within 1 year and not 180 days. If you believe with that, then you can go ahead and you need not report that. But as an auditor, you should also have a proper documentation for this observation, wherein you will have all these points jotted down. So you should say, because of the so and so reason, I did not report this. Because now, as all of us know, the chartered accountants are under constant scrutiny of stakeholders. So we need to be very careful in these aspects. You make sure that your documentation is proper also.
Okay, sir. Moving on to next query. The
How many
pre-GST,
questions we have, Arjun?
sir, we
Still,
have
how many questions we have?
1, 2, 3, 4, so around 6 to 7 questions, sir.
Okay.
Moving on to next query. Just a minute. Okay. This is we have received a credit. The client has received credit note of pre-GST era. No, client has just a minute, sir. I couldn't understand the context of
No
the
problem.
query. I would read the query. We'll let know how it is been understood. Pre-GST credit notes has been issued by the client. Can they be allowed? If not, then how to qualify in audit report? This is for financial year 17-18 and 18-19 9C. Madhav sir, could you got the context of the query, or we will ask the queries to elaborate on the same?
I don't know when he says pre-GST, is it with the GST amount? Because in the transitional provisions, there was a provision which allowed to be, which allowed to issue this pre-GST credit notes also for certain reasons. Say there is a price difference, or if there is a sales returns within 6 months. There were certain scenarios in which it was allowed. If this was issued under those scenarios, then definitely the adjustment can be made.
Okay. So I have asked,
Possibility.
yeah, I have asked queries to add some more clarity in this question so that we can take it up.
Yeah, yeah.
We can move on to next query. Bhavesh, the next query. We have
Yes, Sajjad.
found the RCM liability of. Hello, am I audible?
Audible.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect.
So
Perfect.
while doing an audit for financial year 2018-19, we found some undischarged RCM liability of the assessee. So we are insisting upon the assessee to pay the tax along with the interest, but the assessee is ready to make the payment. Since he is making the payment, is he allowed to avail the credit on such RCM credits? RCM liability.
Financial year 19-20,
18-19, 18-19.
18-19. So as far as time limit for availing the credit is concerned, the same is restricted to September following the financial year, where the cases for the cases where the supplier had issued the invoices. There is one view as to the RCM liabilities that in case self invoice may be issued by the self invoice is issued by the recipient, and because of this recipient issuing self invoice, I can take the credit whenever I issue the invoice. So that, but this view may not be very much sound, may not be very much categorical, because raising of self invoice is a procedural condition. So in my view, September time limit must be catered for RCM credit as well. Sir, over to you.
Yeah, I have a slightly different view. So these RCM transactions we need to classify. One bucket can be those which are received from unregistered person, and another bucket can be those which are received from registered person. So in case of registered person, there is no need to raise self invoice, so I can't take the input tax credit. It is very, very clear. So in case of the transactions wherein the liability is being discharged for unregistered person, I need to generate self invoice also. If you read the law, I don't see any provisions which is giving me the time limit for raising the self invoice. And the take for taking the input tax credit, one of the condition is I should have self invoice also. Otherwise, what is the document based on which I'll take the input tax credit? I should have a self invoice also. So I can say that there is a procedural lapse in raising the self invoice, and because I paid the tax, the substantial benefit also should not be denied to me, and I can take the input tax credit. My view is, even though there is a delay, say for 18-19, I'm making the payment now. So I can see whether self invoice is required to be generated. If answer is yes, then the time limit for this self invoice will be next year September.
Okay, sir. Okay. Moving on to
Again,
next
this is
question.
subject to interpretation. So the auditor has to take a call whether he is going to agree with this view or not. If he strongly believes that this possibility is not there at all, then he has to qualify this. He should disallow the credit. If he believes that this possibility is also there, then he can leave it to the department by allowing the credits.
Okay, sir. Moving on to next query. Bhavesh, this is little bit tricky question. So the query is, yeah, under GST, if the assessee has accounted the credit in his books, can it be treated as availed even though if it is not disclosed in 3B? The context is, while finalizing annual return, as an auditor, I have found some additional liabilities and also some additional input tax credits in his books which he has not disclosed in 3B. As an auditor, can I take a stand that accounting of credit in the financial statements can be treated as availment of credit under GST, and can I set it off against such additional liability?
In my view, no, because availment means hitting into the credit ledger. So for establishing my claim to the credit, there is a condition for availing in GST or 3B. So merely an accounting entry may not substantiate. So therefore, in my view, it must be availed in 3B. Sir, to add.
Yeah, even I strongly believe that the credit should be availed in the return. If you read all the conditions, one of the condition is I should also have this interest in 2A also now. So that is one of the latest condition. And next there is a condition that I should have filed the returns. So why that condition is there? So that condition is to prove that I have accounted that and I have made interest in my returns also. Otherwise, the government will not come to know what is the extent to which you have the credits. I don't think this argument will sustain, but never know because GST is a new law, so anything is possible. So as on today, just by going through the law, so my view, I agree with Bhavesh view, wherein the credit should be taken in returns also. It is not enough if I account only in books.
Okay. Okay, sir. And I think
Sir, just one more thing.
yeah.
Just one more thing which is linked to this, Mahadev sir, can add. Sir, there are many cases in the industry wherein people have tried to take the credit in the they deposited the amount in cash ledger through a challan, but they did not net off. So, for the benefit of people, what is your view in that regard? Where the cash ledger has been popped up with the amount, but we have not netted off. So, this question is linked. That's why I added.
So your question is whether that would be considered as payment of tax.
Payment or not? Yeah. Just to add more clarity to the preceding question.
Correct. So this is one logic also. So even here, department will not consider that you have made the payment because the payment process is complete only when you file the returns. So you have to allocate that amount, whether it is to a CGST liability or SGST or HGST or is it to interest amount. We have to allocate that by disclosing in the return.
Yes, sir. And also in that mega engineering case, they have given little elaboration that the cash ledger where you are depositing, it's not the payment of tax. You are just depositing in your own ledger, which is being maintained by the government. So that we have an option of claiming refund also where there is an excess cash payment. So they are telling whatever deposited in cash ledger is not merely treated as payment of tax unless it is been set off against.
And nowadays, today we have control also to shift the balances. So there is one more point in favor of. So,
yeah. Sir, moving on to next query. In Part 5 of GSTR 9C, there is a specific clause to report on erroneous refund to be paid back. So in this case, there can be two scenarios where, while I am being an auditor for financial year 18-19, during this financial year, I would have claimed the refund of financial year 18. And whereas the refund for 18-19 would have been in 2021. So as an auditor, just because of this point, do I need to relook into the calculations or computations of 17-18 refund application, or do I need to look into the application which was filed 2 years after my audit period? Is it required or necessary for me to comply on such provisions? So to what extent I can leverage on the head erroneous refund to be paid back in Part 5 of GSTR 9C? Bhavesh.
As far as reporting of this refund is concerned, if I think like that, what will happen? 17-18 auditor will not report the refund received because it has not been received in 17-18. Then 2021 auditor will not report because it pertains to 17-18. So refund will never get reported. So because of this, undoubtedly, whenever the refund is received, we need to check and we need to report it.
So you are telling that where I have received the refund during the financial year, which is covered within the audit report,
correct,
I am bound to check the refund calculations. This is what your summary.
Now, again, this is a question of scope, to what extent I need to go. So, Madhav sir, to again clarify on this.
Yeah, Mahadev sir.
Again, I can give you a view which is opposite to Bhavesh's view, but as I said, still we are not experienced the uh, assessment from the department, so we don't know to what extent the department is expecting on these aspects. So another view for this can be that I will see only what is there for my period. So if I'm doing the audit for 2018-19, I will see if there is a claim of the refund for 2018-19. I'll restrict my views or observations only for that year. But again, if I take that view, then as Bhavesh was highlighting, so nobody will review the refund aspects at all. These aspects are not clear. So as an auditor, you can decide what is that you want to do. The
Okay.
views are possible. But if you're taking a call that you're not verifying the refund claims of 2018-19 because when you are doing the audit, it was not claimed. So you can just put upon saying that as the refund claims were not made for 2018-19, there is no verification of the claims which are made. You'll be safer.
Okay, sir. Moving on to next query. Sir, here presently I am doing the annual return process for financial year 18-19, and there I have identified there is an excess payment of taxes more than required. However, during the financial year 19-20, the company has already merged with another company. Now I am filing the annual return for the previous company which was got merged into another company. Can I disclose the excess payment of tax in the previous company's annual return and file a refund application under the merged company's GSTN portal? Is it possible for me to do so?
This issue needs to be think upon. Undoubtedly, reporting will automatically get done in Part 9 of GSTR 9, Table 9 of GSTR 9, because it will reflect excess payment. As far as refund application is concerned, in my view, it must be filed in the old entity name itself. Madhav sir, to add.
Madhav sir, do you want to add anything on this ground?
Sorry, that last statement I missed.
Yeah. So the total context is, sir, this is regarding this merging transaction where the query is that the previous company has paid excess tax payment where I have identified now while filing annual return. However, during the intermediate period, it has got demerged and the new company has been formed. Whether the new company's name, can I file a refund application to get the excess payment of tax made by the previous company?
I think it should be possible, and you cannot, and that is the only option which you have because by the time you make refund application, the old registration may not be in existence at all after it has got merged, right?
Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So the only possibility is to try claiming it in the new entity.
Okay, sir. Sir, the last query for today's session is Bhavesh. Why in my GSTR 3B, instead of availing CGST, SGST credit or IGST credit, I have availed wrongly, vice versa. However, the point, it's not being either short or being excess. As an auditor, what is my responsibility to this scenario?
This case was covered in PPT also, where there is a wrong availment or wrong payment of tax. So we can, since there is just a wrong payment or wrong availment, and the same is compensated by the different nature of tax, there is no interest liability in our view, and auditor must not suggest interest liability, but there is a specific comment which needs to be given. If the same is not corrected, if the same is corrected, there is no need of comment also. So.
Yeah, I also agree with this view. So, but there has to be an observation because we don't know in what way they are going to take this. because especially because there is a restriction on utilization of CGST for SGST and vice versa. So we don't know how the department is going to interpret this issue, but we can always report that overall credit has been matching. The overall credit should have been 500 and it is 500, but only issue is 200 should have been taken as CGST, but it has been taken as SGST. So we can just put that comment and leave it at that stage. We need not comment on any interest liabilities or penalties for
Just to add one more thing, as far as table 12 of GST or 9C is concerned, there is no separate reporting of IGST, CGST, and SGST, whereas in GST 9, which is a management document, there is a reporting of CGST, SGST, and IGST. So, as far as auditor is concerned, it is quite safe, which it appears to me. So, therefore, what Madhav sir said is squarely correct.
Sir, we got one more last query at the end of the time. It is the last
no problem.
people started asking one more query.
No
Okay.
issues.
Query, it is relating to transitional provisions. If the client has paid excess tax, okay, no, it is not transitional credit. It is in GST context only. The client has paid excess tax and also availed excess ITC. Can we treat this as a revenue neutral transaction and not report in 9C, or we need to treat both as a separate transaction and ask the assessee to go for refund for first half and reverse in 9C for second half?
See, Arjun bhai, there is some sort of let's start with something else. As far as input tax credit is concerned, Section 168 specifically cast burden on an assessee to verify its input tax credit and take the credit which is eligible to him. Means the burden is on the assessee. So one view is there that one cannot take any additional input liability, and any additional input liability taken must be reversed, or it will be open for litigation. Whereas when I go to GST law, in multiple places the law suggests any additional input taken must be reversed by adding in output tax liability. So there can be two views. First view is reverse the input tax credit, take the refund of output liability. Second view, based on revenue neutrality, since I had taken excess credit, which I have already reversed in output tax liability, which is anywhere suggested by the law in itself. So there can be two possible views. Undoubtedly, the assessee will not suffer in any of the view.
Okay. Madhav sir?
Madhav sir.
Yeah, even I have a similar view, and this can be similar to what we discussed just before this question also. So if the question is on how to report this, as an auditor, you can always report that this is the total liability which is there because of excess ITC claim, and there is a excess payment of taxes also. So there is no additional liability which needs to be discharged. We will leave it to the department whether they want suggest the assessee to claim this and reverse this ITC, or whether this can be treated as revenue neutrality, because we cannot decide on those aspects, because all these issues are going to be settled only in courts, and this may go up to high court also. So as an auditor or as a chartered accountant, we cannot comment in on these issues. Just leave it by reporting. Don't suggest for additional liability or refund. You need not do that.
Okay, sir. Sir, okay, one additional question. Sir, I have not disclosed credit note in my returns, or I have accounted properly in my books. Can I disclose such credit notes in my annual return and claim refund? Or since I have not disclosed, and since in the instruction of 9, it provides only for additional disclosure relating to liability, does it debars me from disclosing the credit note, which is reduction of liability? However, it is also relating to liability, but the effect is reduction of liability, such undisclosed credit note. Am I eligible to disclose such credit notes directly in my annual return and claim refund? Bhavesh.
See, whereas disclosure is concerned, there are two aspects. One is disclosure and another is refund. So whereas disclosure is concerned, undoubtedly it must be reported, because when I am preparing GSTR 9, I am preparing as per books. And anything which is in books and not in 1 and 3B must be added to GSTR 9. In simple. What it will happen when I'll report the credit note, my output payable tax will be reduced, paid tax will be more. So there would be a difference which would be popped up in table 9 of GSTR 9. As far as refund is concerned, one must try to take this refund. In one practical case we got also, but uh, in legality, the credit note reported in 3B will only be considered when I go to legality. But
So in summary,
also
what
there is
we
a
can
question of legality of
okay. In summary, what I am trying to see is you are trying to say
Mahadev
in
sir
9
will summarize.
that any liability, additional disclosure regarding liability can be disclosed in 9. However, it does not talks about increase in liability or reduction in liability, and credit note it also relates to liability. Is it what you are going trying to sum up so that you can disclose in GSTR 9?
Correct.
Hmm?
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
Mahadev sir, any addition, sir?
Just try your luck by making a refund application. That's all.
Okay, sir. So by this, we have addressed all the queries for today's session, and we can sum up to the end of the session. One general request has been provided that can you people kindly suggest some of the GST books which can be referred for the purpose of this kind of audit and 9C related,
And
which book I need
actually,
to refer?
to advertise our own book itself. So recently, we have updated our practical guide to GST audits and certification. It is a Bloomsbury publication. And what we have heard, so I'm not saying because I am one of the co-author of this book, but the feedback which has been given is tremendous. So those who have asked this question, they can have a look at that book. And especially the latest edition, which is going to get published in next month. And in this book, we have considered our practical experience because earlier, first, this is a fourth edition which is going to come out. First three edition did not have the practical experience because we had not done any audits. So just based on the law, we had done it. But this edition is done based on the practical experience of 2017-18 audit. So if readers are interested, then definitely they can have a look at this book is what I suggest. Apart from this, there is also institute manual on GST audit and annual return also, but I don't think it has got updated very recently. I think the last updation was July 2019, if I'm not wrong. Maybe Bhavesh has some information on that. Even that can be considered.
So
Just to add, today's session was also based on the book which Mahadev sir told, and it is really a good book because I don't find anything out of that. So that's all.
yeah. So by this, we have come to the end of this advanced GST certification course. So I just thank Speaker CA Bhavesh Mittal for your wonderful deliberation on the
Thank
topic,
you.
and Mahadev sirs for providing your expert comments and adding value addition to the deliberation by the speaker. Thank you, Bhavesh. Thank you for your valuable time.
Thank you, Arjun. So I'd like to thank
Thank
Academy
you,
also
Mahadev
for
sir.
the
Thank you very much.
opportunity. See you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So general announcement to the participants stating the recorded videos would be shared with you by the end of today in a link which will be available for you for next 15 days. So you can make use of all the recorded videos of the session, and this is just for a facilitation purpose. The queries regarding any unanswered queries which you have raised during the session would be answered separately through the mails. If you have any specific queries relating to the subject or deliberation by the speaker, you may send us a mail based upon the availability of speaker and also the context of the query. We would try to answer, or we would take it up separately for the queries.
I think there was one question on the transitional credit notes, right, which is
Yes, sir.
unanswered.
Yeah. So we would request the participant to send a separate mail stating this was the session, which was unanswered, so that we would get the answer from the speaker after referring the law, or we would try to answer. And one more thing, the name of the book which Mahadev sir was referring was GST, sir, Then can you tell one more time? The participant is asking the name of the book.
Yeah. So Technical Guide to GST Audits and Certification, Bloomsbury publication.
Technical Guide to GST Audit and Certification, Bloomsbury publication. Okay, sir.
Bloomsbury publication.
Okay, sir. Updated
You
edition
can
is
wait for July edition. So we have sent our edited chapters maybe 10 days ago. So this printing and all will take around a month's time. So you can wait till July end for this new edition.
Okay, sir. Okay. So by this we are ending the webinar. Thank you, Mahadev sir, for your valuable time spent on this.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Thank you.
participants for your patient listening, and hope the advanced certification course would have definitely added value addition to your knowledge. In order to get the regular updates and be a part of our academy, kindly send a mail to divya@hirayangiacademy.com marking me CC, providing your interest to get the newsletter of the academy, and also to be a part of all upcoming value addition and knowledgeable sessions which we are going to conduct. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.